Let's talk about Lyme disease because, a listener sent me a book which I thought was fascinating, and that's a book called Bitten. And the subtitle was The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons. I'd recommend, if you're interested in this, that you go out there and get the book. It's a fascinating book. Now, it doesn't make any final conclusions as to what Lyme disease actually is, but it does a little bit more than just suggest that Lyme disease may have actually been part of a secret U.S. biological warfare program and actually wound up being released into the United States as part of that program. And again, it's not clear whether it was accidental or a purposeful release, but it goes into detail about how you might want to use a biological weapon that doesn't necessarily kill the civilian population, because that would be a war crime, right, but somehow disables them. So there, and I don't know if you know this, but there are 400,000 people a year who are afflicted with Lyme disease. And a lot of doctors and medical professionals for a long time didn't even consider Lyme disease to be a legitimate disease because it's so hard to nail down exactly where it's coming from. Well, the person who discovered the microbe that supposedly creates Lyme, and what the book gets into is it may actually be several microbes at once create the symptoms of Lyme disease. But the person who discovered it is a person named Willy Bergdorfer, who's a Swiss tick scientist, and he started in the early 1950s in the U.S. biological warfare program, working strictly with ticks as a delivery vehicle for these kind of biological warfare diseases. He discovered what's called a spirochete bacteria. It's called Borrelia burgdorferi. It's named after him. That supposedly creates Lyme disease. Now, a spirochete is like a corkscrew-shaped bacteria that can drill into your various tissues and is very hard to get rid of. It's the same kind of bacteria, spirochete that is, as syphilis, for example. So there are these diseases out there that come from spirochete bacteria, but there are other bacteria and organisms, microorganisms involved, including many from the Rickettsia genus, including Rickettsia helvetica, which is called the Swiss agent. And interestingly, Willy Bergdorfer was from Switzerland and traveled back there as part of his research and work with these biological agents. But he worked based out of the Rocky Mountain Laboratory in the Bitterroot Mountains in Montana throughout the 50s and 60s, and it's really a fascinating book. There's so much detail, I can't really summarize it well. I could just tell you that obviously the U.S. government was working on a number of biological weapons delivered through ticks and included using things like the Swiss agent. That was part of their research. I mean, he wrote papers on it. He delivered addresses on it. And this idea of spreading diseases through ticks, they were testing it. They were just randomly dumping ticks different places. In fact, the book tells a story about how the CIA airline, if you've ever heard of it, called Air America, that was active in that time frame. Back in 1962, there was a guy on a plane for Air America and was basically given a couple of cardboard boxes and told to fly low over a part of Cuba, open up the cardboard boxes and dump them out. And, of course, when he opened them, they were absolutely crawling with thousands and tens of thousands of ticks.
Very interesting book.
Yeah. Well, you read it too, didn't you?
I loved it.
I loaned it to you as well, and so you got to read it. And it's fascinating that we would do this and that we would just sort of try these things out on our own population, the innocent populations of other countries. And if you know anything, well, thank you, Melikaliki Maka. That's one of my favorites. If you know anything about Lyme disease and the symptoms of it, I mean, it's a terrible disease. It's debilitating, gets a brain fog, get a lot of pain in your joints. It is a completely debilitating disease for some people, and including the author of the book, Chris Newby. That's how she got into this study, was she actually contracted Lyme disease when she was up enjoying the beach one day with her family on Long Island, and her husband picked up a tick, got bitten, and couldn't get properly diagnosed or figure out how to deal with it, which they eventually did, but that caused her to look into it. Very interesting book, Bitten. Folks, I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.